Okay, good morning. I call my presentation BeRMS, ERMS and WoRMS, Community Tools to Facilitate Our Knowledge on Marine Biodiversity. So my presentation will be from a point of view of a data manager, and what I would like to do the next 15 or 20 minutes is to give some bit of a historical overview on how we came to WoRMS, and also the importance of such a register to facilitate initiatives such as, for example, BeRMS or BeRMS 2020. So I looked a bit for some old presentations on the server of VLIZ, and I think we can say that it all started with a database called Aphia, which was being developed more or less at the same time as the VLIZ Institute started around 2000. And the idea was to create a relational database to provide or to give all information of marine species of the North Sea. It was called Aphia, and it was the web interface of the website at that time. Some of you might still recognize this website. It was the first website of VLIZ, and this pointer is not working. So you can see it was quite upfront also in the menu, this Aphia taxon database, in which we started to work and to basically add information of marine species occurring at the North Sea. At the same time, there was a parallel initiative which was called TISBE, standing for the Taxonomic Information System of the Belgian coastal shelf, in which at that time was state-of-the-art. That's from April 2003, contained information of 2,741 distributions recorded in literature on species occurring in Belgian marine waters, at that time representing 1,757 marine species. So at that time, that was basically the first overview of BeRMS. Conclusions from that time was that it's very important, if you want to set up this kind of overviews, to create these taxonomic overviews or checklists, it's important to have this data taxonomic backbone. But also very important is to do this in a collaboration with taxonomists to improve the quality, of course, of the data, to interpret the taxonomy, but also to add new taxa in such an overviews, or to work in collaboration with the taxonomist to provide accurate references. So that was Aphia. Then in 2005, there was a new initiative, basically, which made the database in VLIZ a bit more serious, let's say, which was ERMS. That was the European Register of Marine Species. It was a project that was being funded by the European Commission under the MAST program from 1998 to 2000. And the final result of that project was basically a checklist of marine species occurring in European waters. But it was only available as a checklist. And it was at that time the data center of VLIZ proposed to also integrate this checklist into the Aphia database engine, which was being developed at that time. So we had that relational database. We proposed that relational data model to the coordinators of the ERMS initiative, and they agreed that this ERMS checklist could also be integrated in this taxonomic data model, which was being developed at the time, and which is basically still at this time also the same relational model that we use for our taxonomy. We did the integration of ERMS in the database. That was being done within the framework of a project, a network of excellence called MARBEF, the Marine Biodiversity and Ecosystem Functionality Project, funded under the 6th Framework Program, in which the data center of VLIZ was responsible for the data management of the project, and Basically, so what we did was we integrated ERMS into our taxonomic database with one common taxonomy. We developed a web interface where users were able to search through this European Register of Marine Species embedded in the Aphia database. But we also invested a lot in really building a marine taxonomic network. So basically we approached different taxonomic experts, asking if they were willing to contribute to the register and to act as an associated editor of the project. And a lot of them agreed. So we were able to build a network of around 100-120 taxonomic editors, which were responsible basically for the content of their taxonomic group within the data system. What happened then was it was the data, the marine taxa, the species list were expanding beyond Europe. So a lot of the taxonomic editors that agreed to become an editor were more and more convinced of the added value of having all this taxonomy integrated in one common data model, and also proposed that we could offer and host global checklists. So, for example, there are several examples. So we also included in the same Aphia data platform all the sponges of the world. Tom was talking about the Prosariata turbellaria. So we integrated the world database of Prosariata and Calyptorhynchia. And there are a lot of different examples of Euridea database became the world database integrated into the same data system. But also several regional checklists, for example, the North Atlantic Register of Marine Species was being added to the taxonomic database. The Antarctic species were being added, which allowed us to basically, so the model was basically that we have one common database with one same taxonomy, and we create several collections within that database. So one species can be European, so it will be part of the ERMS, but it's a sponge, so it is also part of the World Porifera database. So that was a model. And we were able to do it because initially we had some doubts, saying it will be very difficult. Sometimes there are very strong differences in opinion on a specific taxonomy of a species across different taxonomies. But at the end, we were able to basically group different communities, people, and taxonomies together, and having with the same ID on this same taxonomy. So we were able to launch in 2009, I believe, the World Register of Marine Species. So at that time, we had enough significant critical information to upscale basically the database from ERMS to a WoRMS, a World Register of Marine Species, still using the same data platform, the same relational data model. This graph shows the edits and the different, so on the x-axis you see the different taxonomic editors, the number of edits being made by the different taxonomists. So the taxonomists were still responsible for the information, for the quality of the taxonomy, of the species names, of the synonym names. And you see also the growth on the graph below. So not only the number of taxa was being more and more taxa were being added, but also the types of information were being more and more types of information were being added to the register. So there was information available on the taxonomy, of course, full taxonomy, that was the focus of the database, but information on type specimens, more and more information on distributions, information on pictures, vernacular names, also information on attributes, functional attributes, more information on the biology of the species. All was added to the database in that same data model. So WoRMS is at this moment now, or became then really the global standard of marine species name, and is also being used as a standard in different organizations for different initiatives. It's being used at ICES, for example. It's being used at the EEA. It's being used in a lot of different organizations worldwide. And there's really an agreement among the community to use this as the taxonomic reference for marine species. We can also say that it's nearly complete. So we have 242,000 accepted species, of which 87% are currently being checked by a taxonomic editor. So that's very important. There is this taxonomic community behind that quality controls the data. We have 487,000 species names, so that's also very important. That so from the beginning we didn't focus on accepted names alone, but the register is also being used to include synonym names. So for each accepted species, you have almost one synonym name. 624,000 taxon names, a lot of images, and it's constantly being updated into this data platform. So at the moment we have a community of 279 taxonomic editors, so which grew out of these ERMS editors, but became global in scope from 176 institutions working together. And how it's being used, there are a lot of applications of the database. This is an example of a paper where you see the number of species after a data integration exercise being found, for example, in the Arctic, 646, 69 rare species. Before the quality control with worms, after the quality control of worms, it drops from 646 to 378 species, and from 69 rare to 44 species. So you really see the importance if you're going to, by using worms, if you are going to perform, for example, estimates on species diversity, the number of rare species, taxonomic distinctness calculations, and so on. But also the database itself, and the paper was already been mentioned by Tom, also the database itself allowed to really do some big sciences. It was used to assess the magnitude of global marine species diversity, the paper by Appletons of in Current Biology in 2012. And basically it was by looking at the content of the database that they provided the metric on the number of species currently described, number of synonyms that are existing, but also to use this as a tool to assess how many species would occur, how many marine species would occur in the environment. And you can also see a very interesting graph, like in gray, it's the number of species, the number of authors that are describing species. While you see the triangles, it's the number of species described per author. So this gives some insight on that. There are more scientists describing species, but each scientist is describing less species. So basically to highlight the diversification of the taxonomy as a scientific discipline. Another data system I would like to mention here is OBIS, which is managed by IODE, by Wart Appletons, and this is a database which goes very much hand in hand with WoRMS, but is more focusing on the biogeographic information, so where a species is occurring on a specific location at a specific time. So within VLIZ, we are responsible for the European component of the database, EuroBIS, and it's integrating data from more than 1,000 different data collections, providing distribution records, over 25 million distribution records from different functional groups. This is representing fish, benthos, algae, zoophytoplankton, birds, mammals and reptiles. And it is so basically providing for the different species that occur in the World Register of Marine Species and in the European Register of Marine Species information on where they were found at a specific location. Marine species, ERMS data systems that are very key in the setup of this marine biodiversity data infrastructure at our data center. And also very important to mention here is also, I think, the funding projects that allow this, like, for example, LifeWatch and EMOTnet biology. And so the idea is to integrate that species information from different sources and to provide it also to global initiatives such as WoRMS and OBIS. I'm finalizing. Last two slides on BeRMS then. So as I said, initially we had this TISBE register. This gave information on number of species back in 2003. Then in 2010 we launched BeRMS for the first time. Based on the data available in ERMS and in WoRMS. And at that time, the idea was to have a more structured approach, looking at what species occur now at the Belgian part of the North Sea, looking at all known species from marine and brackish waters, with established populations, but also vagrant, exotic, and drift species. And also to use it as a tool to look at probable extinct species which have not been observed during the last 30 to 100 years. So for the BeRMS 2020, what we want to do with the data center, so we had this review in 2003, 2010, we want to do it again in 2020. We will use, of course, WoRMS as a taxonomic backbone to make this possible. So we will data mine WoRMS to see all the information that's available in WoRMS related to the distributions. We will also data mine ERMS for new observation species in the Belgian EEZ, perform an extended literature search on missing information, and then, and being mentioned also by Michiel, complete with additional observations and new tools and methodologies, in order to try to create the most complete national marine inventory probably worldwide. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.